normally we're here on Wednesdays, Wednesdays and Fridays, but we got a special episode because we got a special guest. And y'all know I love special guests. I love people who come with new and exciting stuff that we've talked about, but it's kind of stuff that they've researched, right? So first things first, welcome everybody to the Conspiracy Cookout. This is a special episode. We were off all last week, and I lost my voice literally right before we would have went on anyway. So had we had stuff scheduled last week, I don't know what we would have did. You know what I mean? You know what? Chop would have had to do all the cooking last week. So, you know what I'm saying? We'd have had KKK all last week. You know what I mean? But didn't happen. We were off. We back now. We going to make it happen. So, the guest this week, anybody that does kind of the research that we do into kind of health and nutrition, and alternative information, and traffics in any kind of real information, inevitably you're going to come across several people. All right, because the circle gets real small the higher you go up. When you start looking at who's doing the research, where the information is coming from, and so one of the people that you'll inevitably run into is our guest tonight, Dr. Stephanie Seneff. You know what I mean? Dr. Stephanie, I've seen her for a minute, even before I knew who she was. As a matter of fact, I've seen her before I knew I'd seen her. I think I was telling you this yesterday, Dr. Seneff, how I did not know until I was doing an episode on vaccines and autism, and I went back to review the documentary Vaxxed, and I saw you in there. I said, "Oh no, look, that's her right there." Like I didn't know you were in it until I knew who you were, and then I went back and looked at the documentary. So you've obviously been doing this for a long time, right?
That's right.
So,
yes.
so first say what's up. I want everybody to hear your voice so they know I'm not being a ventriloquist. Say what's going on, Dr. Seneff. How you feel?
I'm here, and I'm happy to be here, and thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the
All
discussion.
right. So first things first, I'm pretty jealous. I don't know. You know I'm in Chicago, right?
I do.
The
You
temperature.
got nice weather there, especially in winter, huh?
See, that's what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. I don't normally let people brag to me about their weather when I'm in winter. You get what I'm saying? So I know you're coming to us from the great state of Hawaii. You know what I
Yes.
noticed? So we had Carrie on a couple of weeks ago, Carrie Rivera.
Yes.
She's not in the United States or in the lower 48 either. It's like
I
everybody
know.
that's kind of in the truth community leaves the goddamn country or gets
I
as far
know.
away
Isn't
from
that
people as
interesting?
possible. I know. Did you get chased off? Like,
I
I
don't
don't
know if I
know.
got chased off, but I was quite happy to escape the main, the busy life of the
Yeah.
big city. So we're in
Okay.
Kauai, which only has like 70,000 people total on the island. So very tiny community. Very
No, you
nice.
got this now. 70,001. All right. Cool. All right. So real quick, let's get into some basic background stuff because I want people to know where you come from, right? So from what I understand, I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, okay? From what I understand, you got your undergrad in biology with a minor in nutrition, right? So you're not
That's
new
right.
to kind of the space that we're in now, right?
That's right.
But your PhD, because you're Dr. Seneff, your
Yes.
PhD is in electrical engineering
And computer science.
and computer science.
Yes.
So you went kind of it's about 37 degrees to the right.
I
You know
know.
what I'm
It's kind of quite a switch.
Yeah. It ain't completely. You didn't go to like liberal arts, but
I
it's
know.
not the same thing, right? All right. So what I really want to know is, so I know you talk about your husband was put on statins because he had some issues with his
Yes.
cholesterol, with his heart, and I know you talked about you had a friend who had an autistic child, and so
Yes.
I understand why you would kind of take an interest in it, but
Right.
what did you do to where you made the switch? Because you were a professor
Right.
of electrical engineering and computer science, and you made the switch to doing research in strictly the medical field. Like, how did
Yeah.
you become taken seriously in kind of medical research?
That is quite a switch, isn't it? And of course, actually, the
Man,
pharma can accuse me of being out of my field in terms of, although I have a doctorate from MIT, I don't have a doctorate in biology, and therefore I'm not qualified to talk about what I talk about, all that kind of stuff. They use it against me, but I do have 4 degrees altogether from MIT, and my whole career was at MIT as not a professor, but a senior research scientist, which is the highest. Eventually, I worked my way up to senior research scientist, which is the highest level on the research track, equivalent to full professor on the research track. So I supervised PhD students, many of them, in the course of my career, but and I taught occasionally, but I wasn't responsible for teaching, which was nice, actually, because I prefer doing research over teaching, so that was good for me.
Mm-hmm.
And my work was actually, for many, many years, was developing, we were in the early days of developing capabilities for the computer to interact with humans using natural language. So we developed what we called spoken language systems, spoken dialogue systems, where you could talk to the computer in Book of Flight. That field has really become commoditized in recent years, and even perhaps has a black eye because of the potential for it to do harm, which I've become very aware of recently. But back then, we were just struggling to get the thing to work because it was really pretty shaky technology, trying to get the computer to help you book a flight using spoken language, which had a lot of
So wait a minute. So what you're
challenges.
saying is, when we have computer overlords, then you're the one to blame?
That's right. I hate
Okay,
to
all right. I
admit
just
that.
wanted to make sure.
We were
All right.
developing these systems back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and we had these systems that were very, very slow because in those days the technology wasn't up for it in terms of the speed. So you would ask the computer a question, and then you could go get a cup of coffee while it thought about your answer. It really took a long time. But we knew it was going to get better later in terms of speed, and therefore we were confident that eventually. It really seemed impossible. I have to say, when we were doing it, I felt like we were doing an impossible task to try to get the computers to the point where they could do this. Now we have this extremely annoying situation where the computer answers the phone and you have to go through all this dance with the computer before you can get it. If you're lucky, you can get a human on the phone, right? And every time I'm doing that, I'm cursing myself for having developed this technology. So.
How many times do I have to say operator before it says it's going to put me through? Like
I know. It tries very hard to not let you see a human. And it's saved a lot of people, a lot of jobs as a consequence, but it's really annoyed a lot of customers, that's for sure.
Man, yeah. So you know what? I have several reasons to be mad at you. Okay, I got you.
That's right.
So for the computer overlords and for not being able to pay my bill talking to a person, I got you. All right. So let me ask you this here real quick before we get into some medical stuff. What do you think about the Chat GPT on OpenAI? So I recently got introduced to it.
That's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I haven't played around with it yet, but it seems like it's very disruptive. I mean, I think it's going to be disruptive in terms of the value of the talent of writing. For example, just a person who's an author, who's a writer by profession. And if, in fact, it comes to be the case that the computer can produce stuff like this very quickly, and that's quite plausible, and quite well written, if that becomes the case, I think it's going to really make it challenging for someone to have a career in writing. I don't know. That's possible. Also, of course, teaching, evaluating, it's supposed to be able to look at an essay and give it a grade. So there goes the skill of evaluating a student's writing, and I think it's very disruptive, potentially very disruptive.
Yeah, no, I get that. All right. All right. So, you go from electrical engineer, like at MIT, and so you're some things happen in your life personally.
Yes.
And you're like, all right, let me redirect my energies, because honestly, to me, smart is smart, right? When people are smart, then it translates to any field, any discipline. It's just a matter of what you choose to focus on.
That's
and so
an
you
interesting
said,
point of view.
it is like intelligence is intelligence, right?
I love to learn. I have to say I love to learn, and that may be what centers me. I think it's unusual because most people don't really want to do their homework, but I love to learn if it's in an area that I'm interested in.
Right.
And I'm still learning now, so I love that, actually. I don't think I'll ever be tired of learning new things, especially in biology.
Buddy. Yeah. So you know what? I think because it's functional, because there's a direct kind of one-to-one correlation. It's like, yo, this is how your body works. Hey, you know what? I have a body. This is, so it's kind of learning about yourself. Or if it's something that's going wrong with somebody then it'll drive you to be like, all right, let me figure out what's wrong with you. It becomes personal.
That's right.
And so
and
it doesn't matter what your degree is in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. In my case, it was around 2007, and actually a lot of things were happening at that time because my field was becoming commoditized, and I could see the end of the line for me because it was getting a little bit uncomfortable for me in that field because, companies were taking over. They had huge staff. They were developing these systems they could make money off of them, and we're just a little lab with a few students. We can't compete with that in that field anymore. It became too hard to compete in the field that I was in before, which was developing these computer systems that could talk to people and stuff. So I was feeling kind of nervous about where my career was going in that dimension. And at the same time, I had this experience of autism that you mentioned. I had a friend actually quite a while ago, 1982, I think it was, around that time frame, that her young son, he was probably a year and a half or so, and he got a DPT shot, and he ran a high fever. He had a piercing cry. A week later, he had seizures, and then he developed autism. And that planted a seed in my brain that there's something going on there between the vaccine and the autism. So I learned that early on. And then around 2007 was when my husband was suddenly diagnosed with this heart problem. And the doctor put him on a high-dose statin, and he said, 4 times a normal dose. And he basically said, you need to take this the rest of your life, 4 times a normal dose of statin, or else horrible things will happen, And so I was interested in statins, and I was interested in autism, and I wanted to figure out what was causing. I saw the autism rates going up every year, all throughout the 2000s, the first decade of 2000. Autism rates kept going up. Oh, we're just diagnosing it more, don't worry about it. I didn't believe it for a second. I thought there's something going on here. And so I wanted to figure out why the rates were going up. But of course, I knew the vaccines were going up too because of that, 1986 law that was passed that said the vaccine companies get off scot-free if somebody gets injured. They have to go through vaccine. The government handles something called vaccine court, and you usually lose. And if you've got autism, forget it. You're not going to get compensation, And so I was aware of all of that. And so I just basically, and I had the same company that was funding me actually continued funding through that transition, which was really awesome. We would periodically renew the funding. I'd had a good relationship with them from way back. And in the most recent period, right before 2007, I was actually quite engaged in developing dialogue games to help a person learn a foreign language. So, and in particular for an English-speaking person to learn Chinese. And so computer games to learn Chinese.
Right.
And so, and that was a fun area, and I would have probably been happy to continue that. But I got so anxious about the situation with the statin drugs and the autism that I wanted to do that anyway. I almost couldn't stand not to study that, and might as well try to see if I can make it into my job. So that's how I basically transitioned. I wrote them a proposal that next year there was a complete switch. I said, I'm going to study the correlation between environmental toxic exposures and disease and see what I find. And they said, great. So I was so happy. And then they've just continued to fund that. Every year they renew it. It's been awesome. So far, so good.
That's
it's
right.
been wonderful.
So, man, you literally just wrote to your funders and said, hey, man, you know what? Yeah, this technology is cool, but I'm going to look at some medical stuff. And so you literally just kind of dove into it, consuming all the materials and information that you could.
That's right. Yeah, I just really dove into it. And it's interesting because I was interested in heart disease and autism. Those were my 2 topics initially. Mm-hmm. And I was aware, the statin drugs, and I was pretty sure statin drugs were horrible even before I even looked, and it was certainly true. And I studied statin drugs, wrote some papers on that. That's a pretty amazing story by itself because I had a good project that I did shortly after I switched over. And this is interesting because I was looking at the web-based, they have these systems on the web where you can enter your data for your experience with a drug. And so they have these databases that just random people off the street can just say, I took this drug, I had this reaction, here's my story, and they sort of fill in the different boxes in the database. And so we gathered all that data off the web and analyzed it. And we could compare. What we did was they had the information about the age of the patient, and then they had a place where they listed their side effects, and they had a place where they described their story. And we took all that data and we massaged it, and we looked at statistical correlations between statin drugs and various side effects to see which ones normalized by age, so we could get a sampling of all the other drugs people are taking across the same age distribution, and look at the likelihood that the statin drug causes that effect versus any of the other drugs. Do you see what I mean? Statistical analysis.
I do. Yeah.
And it was amazing what we found, because basically statins make you grow older faster. It's pretty clear. It's like there's hearing loss, there's going bald, hair loss, there's cataracts, of course, there's muscle pain, muscle weakness, Parkinson's disease, brain fog, depression, and memory problems. I mean, just a huge list of problems that the statins cause. And
All
so
right, for those that
I've
don't
been,
know, statin drugs are cholesterol-lowering drugs. They lower the amount of cholesterol in your body. All right, go ahead, finish.
yeah, that's right. And that's important because cholesterol, and I knew cholesterol is an essential molecule. I even knew that from God, I think first grade or something. I knew that cholesterol was essential. It's really, cholesterol is to
There's
animals as
been a
chlorophyll is
hit
to plants.
job on cholesterol.
I know. It's totally unfair. It's a beautiful molecule and it's essential for life, for humans. You know, it's really, really important. It goes into the membranes of the cells and keeps them healthy. It's just, and the neurons, I mean, the brain has a huge amount of cholesterol compared to its weight, way out of proportion. Huge amount of cholesterol in the brain. It's needed by the neurons to be able to do their job, you know, and so there's no way that it's a good idea to, and in fact, it's a toxin. I mean, what that drug does is it suppresses the liver's ability to make cholesterol. And that's just devastating as far as I can tell. Just devastating. So I don't think anybody
So,
should be on that drug.
are you familiar? You know who Dr. Joe Wallach is?
Oh, I don't think so.
Really? So you know what?
You got to introduce
Uh,
us, huh?
yeah. Hey, you know what? I'll try. But he's the first person I heard just literally break down cholesterol. Kind of what you were saying. He talked
Yes,
about myelin, which is,
yes.
I guess, the insulator in your brain. It insulates the nerves in your brain. Myelin is 98% cholesterol.
Whoa, whoa, that's
Right?
surprising. I don't know that
Yes.
that I believe that, but I know there's a lot
Yo.
of cholesterol. So yes.
Yo, he said myelin is this is from him. He says it's 98% cholesterol. And so that lets us know just how important cholesterol is in the body.
Yeah,
Just
and
in the
especially in the
body.
brain, in the nervous system. That's
Hmm.
where the cholesterol is really high. And it's essential for the muscles as well. I mean, it's just essential for all the cells, but particularly the muscles and brains, and the brain and the nervous system. And of course, I think, you know, I have my own theory about heart disease, and it's completely different from the mainstream theory. It's not a cholesterol problem at all. In fact, it's almost a cholesterol deficiency problem more than anything else, because it's a matter of, and I'd like to get into this because this is important for the autism as well. And it was beautiful how,
Yeah.
by the way, they came together. I was studying the autism, I was studying the heart disease, and I was looking at, and I ended up looking at cholesterol sulfate. I really got zeroed in on cholesterol sulfate quite early on, long before I knew about glyphosate. I was looking at cholesterol sulfate because I found that it played a role in autism and it played a role in heart disease. I felt, you know, from the evidence that I'd seen. It's really fascinating because the skin, there's cholesterol sulfate is basically cholesterol with a sulfate attached to it. Sulfate, going to get a little bit technical here, so let me know if I'm getting too technical.
All right,
Sulfate
I
is
got
an
you.
anion, and it's atom and 4 oxygen atoms and -2 charge. O4 minus 2, that's its formula. Sulfate, and is super important in the body everywhere, especially in the brain, in the vasculature for the blood to flow properly. I mean, it's really, really important. I can't overemphasize the importance of sulfate in the body. And the tricky thing about sulfate is that you can't just throw it out in the blood. It has to be kept at very low levels. Free sulfate all by itself in the blood has to be kept very low because it will gel the blood and prevent the blood from flowing. And so instead, the body has found a way to shuffle it around by sticking it onto other molecules. It sticks it onto molecules that are fat soluble, not water soluble. And cholesterol is one of the most common ones that it uses, cholesterol sulfate. So it sticks sulfate onto cholesterol, and that allows in the skin, in exposure to sunlight. So when the skin is exposed to sunlight, it makes cholesterol sulfate and it ships it out into the blood. And the HDL particles pick it up. They're like little, I like to think of them as little boats that go in and pick up the cholesterol sulfate, and then they deliver it to the big boats, which are like the LDL particles. They're much bigger. And the HDL goes into the skin and picks up the cholesterol sulfate and then carries it and gives it to the LDL particles. They love to have it too because all of them want to have the cholesterol sulfate in their membranes because it will gel the water around that particle and keep it safe. Keep it safe from sugar and keep it safe from oxygen. Keep it healthy. So you have to have sulfate in the membranes surrounding these little lipid particles that are the things that make you get statin drugs. If you've got too much LDL, that's this low density, high density, those are the two kinds. If you are on a statin drug, you probably know these terms, HDL, LDL, because people obsess on their levels. Oh, I've got HDL wants to be high, LDL wants to be low. That's sort of the formula they use, for you to be healthy. But the fact is, the HDL is important for delivering the cholesterol sulfate not only to those LDL particles, but also to the blood vessels, lining the blood vessel walls, and to the red blood cells. So basically, the whole system is based on sulfate being sprinkled everywhere. And the sulfate gels the water. It sticks into membranes and gels the water next door to keep that water. That gelled water kind of tucks everything in to like a jello. And then the red blood cells can just slide effortlessly through the capillaries along that jello surface instead of having all these molecules sticking out and getting in the way. So it's a way to make the blood flow very nicely. And also, all the things that are suspended in the blood have negative charge because of that sulfate. And that negative charge is really important for the blood to circulate well. So all of that works out beautifully as long as you've got enough, not just cholesterol sulfate, but all kinds of other fat-soluble molecules get sulfated and get transported that way. The sulfate helps them to move around, and they help the sulfate to move around. So both of them are helping each other to be distributed throughout the body. And when that can't happen, when you can't put that sulfate onto that molecule, that is huge problems.
Okay, so
is that too much technology? Too technical?
You know what?
A little bit.
We were skirting on the edge, but I think everybody kind of understands. So one, because there's two things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about cholesterol and we're going to talk about sulfur. And so you just kind of correlated the two. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
how they work hand in hand.
They're
joined at the hip, right? So I know you mentioned how cholesterol is needed for the liver to function, right?
Yes.
So how does cholesterol function in the liver?
Yeah, I mean, the liver is the main producer of cholesterol that's distributed to the body. And that's why when they give you the drug, it goes to the liver and it disrupts the liver's ability to make the cholesterol. And so the thing is, cholesterol can become toxic if there's not enough sulfate. The sulfate keeps the cholesterol from being toxic. And more than that, when the liver makes cholesterol sulfate, it actually suppresses liver disease, like fatty liver disease. Cholesterol sulfate fixes the problem. Cholesterol causes the problem. It's that simple, really. The sulfate is crucial for keeping the liver healthy. But the liver can't put the sulfate on the cholesterol because it's being poisoned by glyphosate. That's what I think is going on.
All right, hold on. That's too many. Hold on. The enzyme Go ahead.
The enzyme that puts the sulfate onto the cholesterol gets broken by glyphosate. That's what I believe is happening.
All right, hold on, because we ain't even introduced glyphosate yet. I don't want to confuse
people. Overloaded here.
Okay. I don't want to overload them because we're going to talk about glyphosate
But the statin drug then is going to cause the liver to not have enough cholesterol, which is a problem.
Right.
And
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Joseph.
So, excuse my background. Is there any drug on the market currently that does not deplete the body of a specific cell salt, if you will? Because what I'm finding is, like the Philosopher's Stone, in my opinion, or what I've seen, or what I've heard, or what I've learned, is that keeping all the cell salts in balance is what keeps the body intact in every way, shape, and form. But it appears that all modern day medication or drugs, because that's really what they are, those are the real drugs, are what throws your body out of balance. Because there may be too much production of one thing, but it seems as if you would balance the other cell salts, it'll bring the other thing that's out of balance into balance so that you don't have a manifestation of disease. But when you start taking these medications or these drugs, that's when it starts depleting the cell salts and then disease manifests.
I'm not catching that word. Is it cell salt?
He's talking about the cell salts, the salts that are in your cells. So like
SALTs, like calcium, right? Cell salt. Is that
yeah,
what you said?
Yes,
yeah,
ma'am.
The various minerals that are there.
Yes, ma'am.
But it's much more than the minerals. I mean, I really do believe that. I have very little faith in any prescription drug, to be honest with you. Statins, I think, are terrible, and I don't have the proof of the other ones, but I think that the whole concept, the way the drugs work typically is that they find a toxin, really, or it starts often with a biological toxin, and that's what happened with the statin drugs. It was a biological toxin that was produced by a form of yeast, and that toxin suppressed the synthesis of cholesterol by messing up an enzyme. and then they modify the toxin. They make a drug that's not natural that does the same thing. And they don't want it to be natural, because if it's natural, you can't patent it. So that's another thing that's really annoying about the drugs. None of them are natural. They're always synthetic. If they're natural, they can't be patented, which is a huge problem for the industry, because they want it to be a not natural molecule, which is already very bad, because the body doesn't understand these molecules that are made up in the chemistry lab. But the drugs are typically poisoning you by disrupting an enzyme, and usually a very critical enzyme, and that suppresses something that needs to happen. And your body is very smart, and it reacts to all these different things that are going on. It's being exposed to all kinds of toxic exposures all the time in the modern world. And it's finding ways to get around the problem that aren't ideal, but they're better than nothing, you know. And then you basically disrupt what the body's trying to do, and then the body has to go find something else, you know, some other way around it. So the body has many alternative choices for what it might do in response to all this mess. But every time you get another drug in the system, it's just another disturbance for the body that it has to then find some other pathway to get around that. So it's a constant game of, that's why you take a drug, it causes a side effect, you take another drug to fix the side effect. Pretty soon you're taking 30 drugs. I mean, it's just crazy what we're doing today. Really, really insane, in my opinion.
So, you mentioned the correlation between cholesterol. So the liver makes cholesterol, right? But
Yes.
When it's processing fructose, right?
Oh,
It can't
yes.
make it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, that's really bad, because the fructose, the liver ends up having to convert the fructose. Normally, the liver converts the fructose into fat, and it stores the fat with cholesterol. But when it doesn't have enough cholesterol, it can't do that. And normally the liver, so first of all, the fructose usually gets metabolized in the gut by the gut microbes, but they can get in trouble too, again, because of the toxic exposures. So the fructose ends up going to the liver, and that's sort of the last stop before it's going to get into the circulation. The liver, one of its big jobs is to get rid of all the toxins that are coming through. So it tries to pull the fructose out and convert it into fat and store it with cholesterol. But if it can't make cholesterol, if the fat can't be stored unless it has to have a proportional amount of cholesterol. So when it can't make the cholesterol, the liver basically can't take that fructose up. It has to let it go. And the fructose goes into the general circulation. And then it becomes the job of the muscle cells to take up the fructose. And that's when they get into trouble, because they convert it into methylglyoxal, which is a really, really bad glycating agent, 10 times worse than, I think fructose is 10 times worse than glucose, and methylglyoxal is 10 times worse than fructose, something like that. Hugely bad glycating agent, which is what you have associated with diabetes. So it's basically reactive sugars causing damage to the muscles. And then, of course, the muscles you get pain, you get weakness, your muscles become damaged by the fructose that they're stuck having to deal with because the liver can't. And the liver can't because it can't make cholesterol. Does that make sense? That's a little bit complicated.
It did. No. It's fine. So the thing is, what people understand is, because I think what I wanted you to kind of explain is that the correlation between the liver cholesterol being produced and your body consuming fructose.
Yes.
Right. And so
yes.
how consuming the sugars or certain types of sugars have a negative effect on.
Well, yeah, they
your
require
body.
the liver. You're right. They require the liver to make that cholesterol in order to be able to store the fat that's coming from the fructose. Yes.
Exactly.
Everything gets messed up in a cascade effect. It gets complicated, but it's quite fascinating, really, and disturbing, to see the consequences of all that.
Real quick, let me ask you this. You're hard to find. Like, you can't find you on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
And so you're kind of hard to find. So, like, how do you feel
censored.
about
I'm majorly
Yeah,
censored.
you're shadow banned. Like, how do you feel about that? I was just curious.
Well, I'm furious about it. I have to say, I got back on Twitter. I just got back on Twitter a few days ago. I'm very happy about that, because I got thrown off of Twitter. I mean, they don't like me, basically, right? They don't like what I'm saying. And I mean, I have noticed, sort of, what do they call, shadow banning, where you're still on, but nobody's seeing you anymore. Because they can just write the computer code to just say, oh, yeah, kick this one down because this is bad news. We don't want people to hear it. And they've done that with a lot of they keep away the information that is really important for people to learn how to be healthy. They keep it away from their view.
1,000%. 100%. So yes, there are people, a lot of people kind of who talk the information that you talk. Carrie, can't find her, can't find
Yeah,
a
I
lot of the
know.
guys
All of us
that
are
you
being
talk to on a
majorly
regular.
suppressed.
Dr. McCullough, can't find him.
Oh, I
Um,
know.
yeah. All
It's
right.
really sad because he's one of the best. I think he writes an
He
incredible
is.
profusion of really good articles that come one after the other. He's amazing. I'm sure he's got an outstanding team, but boy, he's impressive, Mercola. Did you
Yeah.
say McCullough or Mercola? Because both of them are being suppressed. Yeah,
Yeah.
McCullough as well. Dr. Peter McCullough is another one that's being
Yeah.
suppressed.
Yes,
Yeah,
him as well.
yeah.
All right. So there's one more thing before we get into kind of sulfur. You mentioned the Weston was it the Weston diet? Can
Weston
you talk?
Price. Weston
Yes,
Price.
Weston Price, where he looked at indigenous diets around the
Yes,
world. Can you
yes.
talk about that for a second?
Yeah, that's really important. And that was a book that I read many years ago, and it had a profound influence on me. I've always, by the way, felt that fats are healthy. All through the low-fat craze, I never bought into it. I refused to buy any product that announced that it was low-fat, non-fat, fat-free. Any of those labels, I wouldn't buy it. My whole life, I never embraced the low-fat concept. And I was right, because now I think it's very clear. Lots of information is coming out that fats are good for you, and especially saturated fats, which is quite surprising because people are taught to. And one of the things people do to try to keep their cholesterol low is to not eat animal-based foods. They go completely plant-based because plants don't have any cholesterol. So if you want to go cholesterol-free, eat a completely plant-based diet, and that will not be good.
Hold on. So, never mind. I'm gonna go on mute. Never mind.
No?
Hey, just so you know, I have a number of vegans on my team.
Uh-oh.
All right.
I just
Now,
offended a lot of people, right?
We're not vegan. We're not vegan. We are
Not
plant-based.
vegans.
You don't mind.
let me put it like this: I have a number of plant-based individuals,
Good job.
Okay.
and
Thank you.
Okay.
right.
And actually, let me back off because
Hold on,
the
what she say?
Western Price diet does have plants. It certainly does. And in fact, it emphasizes fermented foods, which I think are really outstanding, and fermented plant-based foods, so like a sauerkraut and apple cider vinegar and any kind of even fermented animal-based foods like yogurt and sour cream and that sort of thing. So cheese is a fermented food. So any kind of fermented food was part of what Weston Price found. And he went around the world to many different parts of the world, way up north and in the Pacific Islands, in Europe. And he looked at, and it was at a time when, it was in the 1930s, so this is a long time ago. And it was a time when the world was transitioning from sort of the original sort of whole foods, to more refined foods. And there was, white flour, white sugar were starting to be marketed around the world. And they would sell candy. So the West would bring on ships, they would bring this Western food, which was often based on white sugar, white flour, to these islands. And then some of the people in the island were mostly eating that food, but there were other people who were still on the traditional diet, the indigenous diet. And that's what he compared, the people who were on the indigenous diet versus the ones who were adopting the Western diet. He compared them in all these different places, and he consistently found that the ones who were still eating the native diet were much, much healthier. That was basically his message. And it was interesting because he went all kinds of different places where the diets were very different, but they all had a common theme that involved animal-based foods, and especially animal-based fats, and fermented foods. Those were kind of the two basic components of their diet. And not so much in the way of grains, so staying away from flour and things like that, the breads and the pastas and things of that sort. So they were basically fresh fruits and vegetables, but lots of fermented foods. And of course, fermentation was part of keeping it preserved so it wouldn't spoil. So that was a good technique for doing that. But it also really improved the nutritional value of the foods through the fermentation. And part of that is just the actual microbes that are in there that can help to replenish your gut microbes.
All right. So just to be clear, Dr. Seneff, I am not one of the plant-based community. I am big carnivore vibes.
Oh,
And
good.
yeah, no. I'm with all the smoke. and I let them know how terrible their lifestyle is on the regular. So feel free to tell the truth to these people as much
Don't
as
do
you
that.
want.
Don't do
All
that.
right,
We've got some
Keto
objectors in there.
here.
let them know. All right, big plenty of big meat eater vibes right here. Okay,
Facts.
bacon, sausage, steaks, hamburgers,
Excellent.
all that. I'm here
Yes.
for it. I'm here for all the
Good.
smoke. All
But
right.
Yeah,
hold
well,
on,
it's
isn't
interesting
isn't the
because,
plant-based diet messed up anyway because the lack of minerals in the soil?
well, that's right. Yes, you're absolutely right. And of course, also glyphosate is, we haven't gone to glyphosate yet, but glyphosate is Roundup, and it actually interferes with the ability of the plants to take up the minerals that are there. And in fact, my friend Don Huber, Professor Don Huber, he was the one who first introduced me to glyphosate. And he showed in dramatic slides that he showed dramatic reductions in the minerals in the plants that were exposed to glyphosate versus the ones that weren't. They couldn't take up the minerals because the glyphosate was disrupting the microbes that would help them to do that. That was very interesting.
So just so you know, feel free to take as many shots at plant-based as you want. I'm here for it. All right, I'm here for all of it. You know what
I
I
think plants
mean?
are healthy. I don't want to say they're not healthy,
I
but
was
the
about to
thing
say
is,
no. Don't feel free. Do not feel free to do that. But are you
I just think,
suggesting that you can't add minerals into the soils?
well, you
Like
certainly can. And in fact, I think that's part of the
exactly,
answer is to repair the soil. We need
exactly.
to
Thank you.
first get rid of the glyphosate, and then you can actually treat the soil. And it's interesting because the way to fix the soil is very similar to the way to fix the gut. They're kind of the same thing
Mm-hmm.
in many ways, and both of them have to do with microbes. And the microbes are all messed up in the soil, just as they are in the gut. And this is all because of glyphosate. I'm sure there are other things too, but glyphosate is a major mess up for the soil bacteria and the gut bacteria. And then, of course, the minerals become depleted. So you have to kind of nourish the soil in the same way as you might nourish the
Exactly.
gut.
Replenish the soil.
Well,
Yes.
wait. Quick point. I wanted to just point out because y'all know I've been on this kick for like the last 2-3 weeks. Um, with us being keepers of this realm, you got to start tapping into the electrical grid, and by tapping into the electrical grid through electroculture, I really feel like we'll see the soil being restored because you're electrically charging the soil, just like we need to be electrically charged as human beings that are made of energy. I really feel like that'll fix a lot of things that we're seeing.
Well,
I,
that's an interesting
And
theory.
so one of the
hey,
best ways to remediate soil is to plant hemp. Don't forget that hemp will
Hmm.
remediate soil better than anything else that's been found. So all the more reasons why industrial hemp should be planted
I
everywhere.
agree with that, by the way. I've looked into that. That seems very, very interesting to me.
that's dope. All right, so real quick,
Again, using nature, right? Using
yes,
natural.
Let
I
ma'am.
really
nature knows
believe
how to
in
heal itself.
using nature to make nature better.
hmm Um, so real quick, have you ever heard of electroculture, Dr. Seneff?
I don't think so. I don't
Okay.
think so. Yeah, I might.
All right. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
would be interested.
All right, cool. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
So real quick, it's something else that you touched on that I want you to expound on. Can you talk about the difference between sunlight versus vitamin D?
Ah, that's a tricky topic, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
I have
yeah.
a controversial position on that as well. I think a lot of people are shocked by my position on vitamin D because I think vitamin D is a very important nutrient. Obviously, it's been shown to be high vitamin D has been shown to be correlated with a lot of good things. But I don't believe that taking vitamin D as a supplement is a good idea. And I've never done that. I've never taken vitamin D as a supplement. But I do strongly support sunlight exposure. And I do sunlight exposure regularly. I really work hard at getting sunlight exposure. I don't use sunscreen. I don't use sunglasses. I really believe in sunlight exposure to the skin and to the eyes as a way to get healthy. And the most important thing, takeaway message in my point of view, is that sunlight is not just about vitamin D. And vitamin D is a signaling molecule that's indicating that you've been exposed to the sun. So in other words, the sun actually, as I mentioned before, it makes cholesterol sulfate. It makes vitamin D sulfate. Both of those are released into the blood and they circulate. But the vitamin D is a messenger. It goes to the liver and it basically reports, oh, by the way, here I am. That means you got some sunlight. It's giving you that message. And then the liver modifies the vitamin D with enzymes that, by the way, get messed up by glyphosate. so it might not work. Then the liver sends the vitamin D modified to the kidneys modify it again. And what the vitamin D is doing, I think, is it's saying, check, okay, sulfation pathways are healthy because here I am, sulfate, I'm going to the liver. Check, oh, these CYP enzymes in the liver are working because here I am, I got modified with the CYP enzyme. And then I go to the kidneys and I confirm, oh, the kidneys are good too. They've got healthy CYP enzymes. Then I'm active and now I can do my job, which is to tell all the cells, oh, everything's great, everything's healthy. If any of those pathways fail, you get low vitamin D. And you have low vitamin D because you've got defects in those pathways. And that's the point of the low vitamin D, to say either you didn't get enough sun exposure or you've got problems with your enzymes. So the vitamin D is a messenger. And if you take lots of vitamin D without everything else that normally comes with it, it's a false signal. It's a false signal. And it can mislead the cells into bad behavior.
So it's kind of like
Can
chewing
you break that
gum.
down again?
It's kind of like chewing gum, right? So chewing, the act of masticating, it tells your body that, hey, something's about to go down in my stomach. And so chewing gum can actually prompt your stomach to release digestive acids, right? But when you don't put anything down there, you end up just with digestive acid with nothing to digest. So it's kind of the same thing.
And that is a good analogy, yes.
Yeah, same thing. So taking vitamin D is telling your body that, hey, I'm in the sun and prepared to receive all this sun, like all the benefits of being in the sunlight.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
But it's a lie. It's a lie because you just took a huge dose of vitamin D instead. And also the vitamin D requires these CYP enzymes to be activated. If the liver has all this vitamin D coming in, the CYP enzymes are distracted from other jobs that they should be doing. Because those same CYP enzymes that activate the vitamin D also make the bile acids, they process, they clear drugs, they remove toxins. They do a lot of good things, one of which is activating vitamin D. But the activating vitamin D is really just a test to say, oh, yeah, they're working. But if you've got massive amounts of vitamin D coming in, you're busy doing the test all the time. You can't do the real job.
So I have a question. Is it not good, like, say, in the winter months, if you're in a place that is extremely cold, not a lot of sunlight?
I know.
No? Still don't
No,
do,
that's a problem.
Still don't do?
I'm saying that's a problem, yes.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. A lot of people have asked me, should you get under the lights, and just do some light therapy, like even UV light. So the thing is, at least you need the infrared, the UV, the blue light. So you need basically full spectrum sunlight to do the things that the sun does. And if you just expose to UV, that's not good. Everything wants to be balanced. So you need sort of simulation sunlight. So they do have sort of full spectrum. I have suggested, and again, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, I've never tried it, but I'm aware that there are these animals that you can buy, these, I don't know, they're some kind of lizard that you have to get them 2 lamps, one is infrared and then one is UV, and they have to
is that iguanas?
Iguana, yes, I think so.
Yeah,
you have to have these lamps with them, and you can buy those lamps.
Yep.
And I have wondered whether, I don't want to say this is something anyone should try, but it could be that those would be interesting to try for yourself, in the winter, to get the infrared and the UV at the same time. Because that's important. The infrared plays an important role in the sulfate.
Yeah, to back up what you're thinking there, 100%. So if you look into biohackers, you'll see all the different types of light spectrums that they expose themselves to on a regular basis, and it covers full spectrum with that. So yeah, you're on the right track with it.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So I think if I were forced to live in I'm fortunate because right now I'm in Hawaii, so I get plenty of sunlight in the winter, which is awesome. But not everybody can afford to go to Hawaii in the winter.
Remember my policy on bragging about the.
I'm sorry.
I have a policy on it.
I'm sorry.
I don't allow these things in my presence. From now on, if anybody asks, you're in Russia. Right,
okay.
So in my mind, you're in Russia, Dr. Seneff.
In Siberia, right?
Exactly. All right. So here, that's good stuff. Because it's just a bunch of little nuggets that I heard you talk about. I was like, yo, she got to talk about this. All right. You know what? I'm under the impression that whatever we're told to do is for the detriment of our health, right? The more and more I research, the more and more I study, the more and more I listen to people like yourself who studies. What I come to find out is everything that they tell us to do is they're trying to do us in. You know what it reminds me of? So one of my favorite analogies is, you ever watch Tom and Jerry? Like some of those old Tom and
Oh,
Jerry
yes,
episodes?
yes.
So do you remember the episode when Jerry was teaching the little mouse, like how to be a mouse? He was teaching like lessons on how to be a mouse.
Uh-huh.
And so one of the lessons was, he was like, all right, we're going to go put this bell on Tom. And so Jerry did all this slick stuff to go slip this rope around Tom's neck, right?
Uh-huh.
And then the little baby mouse just put he put the bell in the bow, like in a box with a bow, and
Uh-huh.
gave it to Tom,
Uh-huh.
right? And then Tom happily put it on, right?
Uh-huh.
It seems like that's what's being done to us. Like they wrap
Right.
all the terrible stuff in a bow and give it
Right.
to us, and then we internalize it as if it's something good, right? So one of the things you talked about was the difference between hard water versus soft water, right? Hard water has the sulfur in it.
Uh-huh.
Soft water, which is what we typically drink and all that stuff, they remove the sulfur, right?
Right.
The Clean Air Act remove, and so they sell it to you like,
Yes.
yo, we're going to remove sulfur and air from the water. And people cheer like, yes, remove sulfur and air, right? Then you have
Yes.
farmers who remove the soil from remove the sulfur from the soil,
Right.
right?
Well,
So
in
it's
fact, as it rains and there's no sulfur in the rain, so the soil becomes depleted in sulfur.
And from the diesel fuel.
right, and so
Right. Yes.
so everything, like they're selling us this sulfur as like a bad thing, right? Or they're selling us
Right.
sulfur as this thing that has to be eliminated from the public, and you don't consume it or anything like that, right?
I know. It's interesting how we mess things up because we think we're smart, but we're not, and we're misunderstanding what's going on. And lots of times I think it is a case of some toxin in the environment that's messing something up, and then we see that there's a problem, and we try to fix the problem by adding some more stuff, and we make it worse because it's all, it becomes a mess after a while because we keep trying to fix it with the wrong solution. And then we end up with nothing working. I mean, I think, again, getting back to glyphosate, I think it's playing a major factor in climate change, and I suspect a much bigger factor than people realize, because glyphosate actually suppresses enzymes in the plants that capture carbon dioxide from the air and turn it into organic matter. I found many studies that have shown that glyphosate suppresses these critical enzymes that can, chlorophyll, plants have chlorophyll, they can take the carbon out of the air, they can turn it into organic matter. They eventually store it in the soil, it can become rock, it can become coal. I mean, trapping carbon dioxide from the air into the soil is an important part of improving climate change, because climate change is a lot about too much carbon dioxide in the air.
So glyphosate is the main ingredient in Roundup, right?
Yes.
And so I think it was so we did a show on this about a month ago, right? So I think it was approved in I think in the 70s or something,
Yes,
right?
that's right. Good memory.
Yeah, and 73, I feel like, is when it was approved,
That's
right?
probably about right.
And so ever since then, they've been spraying it on chemicals. And ever since then, that's literally, so I did a side-by-side graph, right, of when they started spraying, that they approved glyphosate and Roundup, and they started spraying it, and when autism took off.
Oh,
And
I know. It's amazing, isn't it?
it's literally kind of, it runs together, right? The use
That's
of
exactly
glyphosate.
what I found. When I got back to my story because I started looking into autism back in 2007, and I was looking at all these different possible exposures that might be causing it, and I didn't think of glyphosate at all because glyphosate's safe. It's a very common chemical. It's not regulated. You could just go down to the local garden store and buy some and spray it on your yard. I mean, it's a very safe chemical, so how could it be causing autism? That was my logic. Everybody else's logic too, And so I didn't look at glyphosate. But then once I did discover it, and this was again Don Huber who really showed the way for me. I listened to a 2-hour presentation. I was live. I was in the audience at a conference where he gave a 2-hour presentation on glyphosate. And that was the first that I even knew the word, really. I knew about Roundup, but I didn't know the technical term. And this was in 2012, so not that long ago, a decade ago. And he gave a 2-hour presentation, and he talked about all these problems with the gut microbes and the minerals and all of this. And I knew that the autistic kids had trouble with the gut microbes. They had a lot of a lot of gut issues. and I knew they had mineral problems. And so it was just like, wow, this is it. And he talked about the liver toxicity as well. And so I became, just in those 2 hours, I became convinced that glyphosate could well be the main problem causing the autism epidemic. And then when I looked at the data, oh my God, it was a perfect match. Autism in first grade in the US compared with glyphosate usage integrated over the previous 4 years, so from the age of 2 to the age of 6 in the child's life. Perfect match, incredibly good correlation with a 0.99 correlation coefficient. 1.0 is the highest it can be, like just the two curves coincided. It was so amazing. And that's when I said, this has got to be it. I think glyphosate is not the only thing that causes autism, but I think it's the primary cause of the epidemic in autism that we have today.
So let me ask you this. Well, it's a couple of things. One, if glyphosate is so bad, how could they sell them being able to spray it on our food? Because they spray it on our food. I don't know if anybody's ever seen pictures of them spraying it on the food, but they're in hazmat suits as they spray it. Right? So
right. They know it's toxic, right?
They know it's fucking toxic, and they're sitting there spraying it on the food right before they harvest it. And so the question is, how could they get away with spraying it on the food right before they harvest it? What kind of logic can they use to say, hey, it's okay?
I know. I don't know. I mean, obviously, if they're wearing hazmat suits, they know it's toxic. The government is convinced, has been convinced by the industry that it's a great herbicide because it kills all plants except for those that have been engineered to resist it, and it's completely harmless to humans. That's basically what the messaging is. It's completely harmless to humans. That's why I hadn't even considered it. I never used it because I don't like toxic chemicals. I'm proud to say that I never used it on my lawn, but I didn't have any idea the extent to which it was present in the food supply until I started looking. You have no idea. I mean, it's just amazing. And you mentioned Zen Honeycutt earlier. She's a friend of mine. She's the founder of Moms Across America. And she has done a great job of trying to get the message out to people about glyphosate. And she's done actual studies, and her most recent study is very interesting because she got she has a fan club, and she got them to go to their children's schools and purchase samples of the school lunches that they were serving at the public schools. And then they sent those samples off to test to a lab to have all kinds of tests done. And one of the tests was glyphosate, and they found over 95% of the samples tested positive for glyphosate, and some of them had really high levels. And things like pizza, had really high levels of glyphosate. So it's pretty worrisome that the kids are eating. And I know, for example, Goldfish crackers, Oreo cookies, they have tested very high. Cheerios, these are all really popular foods with kids. So the kids are getting a really toxic dose of glyphosate in their food.
You said pizza, Chicago deep dish pizza has a lot of.
Hey yo!
I love pizza myself, so that's painful.
This is what we're not doing. There will be no Chicago deep dish slander here today, I swear to God.
It's interesting, the slander that you allow, but so one-sided.
Anyway, so I think one of the things you said that I think is really important, right? And so what the people who, the proponents of glyphosate will say is that our studies show that glyphosate is only taken up by the chicken-May pathway. Humans don't have the chicken-May pathway, so it can't be harmful to humans. What are you talking about? You're stupid. You don't know science. And so they say stuff like that to us, right?
Right, yes.
That's literally something that they would say. You guys are dumb. You don't know how it functions. You know anything about science. You're not a doctor, right? You're not a doctor of medicine, stuff like that, right?
Yes.
But what they won't say is that even though humans don't have the chicken-May pathway, the microbes in our gut have the chicken-May pathway.
That is right.
And so when we eat the food, even though we can't take it up directly, the microbes, the bacteria in our gut takes up all those poisons, right?
That's right, and it messes them up. It messes them up. So if their chicken-May pathway is not functioning, then they can't make critical nutrients that we depend on because we don't have the pathway, so we can't make those nutrients. We depend upon our gut microbes to make them for us. And those nutrients are actually aromatic amino acids. There's 3 of them, and those are the 3 of the 20 basic coding amino acids that make up really the code of life. The whole famous DNA codes for proteins, and those proteins have amino acids in them. There's about 20 of them. organized in a row. It's fascinating, the DNA code, but that's another story for another day. But anyway, those three aromatics, tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine, they come from the shikimate pathway. The gut microbes make them for the host, and they are precursors. They're not only important for the protein synthesis, but they're also precursors to very important biologically active molecules, such as all these neurotransmitters, serotonin, melatonin, the skin tanning agent melanin, thyroid hormone, some of the B vitamins. All these things come out of that pathway. So when that pathway is disturbed in the gut microbes, we get major problems with deficiencies in lots of things.
Right. So I know one of the other things that you talk about is glyphosate. Is similar to glycine, right? So I guess
Exactly. It is a glycine molecule. It's a
it's
complete
a
glycine
glycine
molecule,
molecule.
except for an extra attachment on its nitrogen atom, which makes all
Right.
the difference, of course.
And so what happens is the body, if it's looking for glycine to perform a function, it will take up glyphosate in its stead because it looks similar. Just like
That's exactly right. Very well said.
And so putting any kind of DNA strands or molecules that require glyphosate gets in there, and putting glyphosate in the place of glycine, it doesn't function the same, right? It's
That's
not like,
absolutely
oh,
right.
it's
It can
similar.
really destroy its function altogether. And I can give you an interesting example, which is the protein myosin. Myosin has 11 places where it has essential glycine, meaning that if that glycine is substituted with something else, the protein doesn't work well. And there's a paper about one place in particular. I forget exactly which nucleotide. I almost remember it, but it doesn't matter. One place where there's absolutely essential glycine in that molecule. And if you take that glycine out and replace it with alanine, which is a minimal change, the protein is dead in the water. Myosin is a contractile protein in muscles. And for example, in the gut, myosin is what causes the gut to contract, to push the feces through the gut. And if you give it glyphosate instead of glycine at that spot, the molecule can only contract at 2% capacity. It loses 98% of its ability to contract. And so I think glyphosate is messing up peristalsis in the gut to cause constipation. We have an epidemic in constipation. And this could be a mechanism by which that's happening.
And so this takes us directly to autism, right?
Yes.
Because one of the things that Zen Honeycutt, one of the videos that I saw, is that her and I guess it was another doctor she knew, they had some vaccines tested for glyphosate.
Yes, you're right.
And
I know that well.
yeah, can you talk about that? Because
I
they sent them
certainly
to the
can,
CDC.
yes.
Go ahead.
I was behind that, actually, behind the scenes, because I told Zen I suspected they might have glyphosate in them because of the way they're manufactured, because the live virus vaccines the virus is actually cultured in a medium where they feed them nutrients, and those nutrients come from sources that could easily be contaminated with glyphosate. So I was suspecting that the microbes could have been grown on food that contained glyphosate, and the viruses themselves. And so then it gets into the vaccine, and then it is really trouble, because when you inject glyphosate past all the barriers, that is really, really bad news. And so she tested several vaccines, and Anthony Samsel is the one who also tested several vaccines. They both did it at about the same time, independently, and they kind of tested the same vaccines, and they got the same results. So they got consistent results between the two experiments. And interestingly, the MMR vaccine had the highest levels by far of all the vaccines they looked at, which is very interesting, because that's the one that's been implicated as being causal in autism by Andy Wakefield, and where he's gotten really clobbered for that. But he was worried about MMR causing autism back in the late 1990s, and published a paper that got retracted, and he lost his medical license in the UK. I don't know if you know that whole story, but that's a really interesting story on the state of affairs in the world right now, because he was trying to point out to people this MMR vaccine seems to be a problem. These kids are getting sick, and I think that glyphosate could be a major contributor to the toxicity of the MMR vaccine. Are you still there?
Yeah, my bad. My phone, like, I got kicked out. The app is acting up, but no, I'm still here.
Oh, good, great, okay.
Yeah, but no, no. So, talking about So with all the damage that glyphosate can cause, it being in the vaccines, getting injected directly into the veins of kids, right?
Yes.
And then you talk about the role, and so you just got done talking about the kind of problems it causes in digestion, right?
Yes.
And so that's one of the main markers in autism,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Is these kids
I
that
had realized that before I heard that lecture because I'd been studying autism for 5 years. By the time I heard the lecture by Don Huber, I was ready for it, this issue with the gut, because I was looking for something they were eating because I could see their gut microbiome was messed up. And their gut was messed up. They had bloating, they had discomfort, they had constipation, diarrhea, they had all kinds of problems with the gut, many of the autistic kids.
Mm-hmm. And so that's been so I think that's where Carrie comes in, and so I think that's kind of the marriage between the I guess cholesterol, glyphosate, autism, and I guess there's one other thing that you talk about is aluminum, right?
Yes,
And
that's
how they
right.
put aluminum in the vaccine. So I thought this was interesting as I don't know what. Okay, it's a couple of things. One, so if you just put without the aluminum, you take the vaccine without the aluminum, and they inject it in people, the body doesn't even respond to it,
That's
right?
right.
The
Adjuvant.
body
That's the whole
ignores
term.
it.
An adjuvant is something you add to attract the immune system to the injection, because otherwise it kind of doesn't care. It's like, oh, nothing much happening here. I don't need to react, and then you don't get your antibodies. So you've got to give some kind of an irritant to go with the vaccine in order to make it work, in order to get the immune cells to come in and play their game and make their antibodies.
Right. So they add aluminum to it to make the body respond to it, right?
Yeah,
And so
that's
what you
right.
say is the more aluminum that they add, the more the body responds,
That's right.
right?
Yes.
And so then you talk about the problem with aluminum in the body, right? So can you
Absolutely.
talk a little bit about the problem with aluminum in the body?
Well, and certainly I can say another thing, which is that there is aluminum in food, which is also problematic, but the gut, if it's healthy, the gut doesn't let the aluminum get past the gut barrier. Very, very little of it gets in to the main circulation if it's in the food, and if you've got a healthy gut. Of course, if your gut's leaky, that's another story. And I think glyphosate also facilitates the entry of aluminum past the gut barrier. I've written about that. But the vaccine, aluminum is, again, past all the barriers. So it's ready to go into the circulation. The immune cells pick up the aluminum and they carry it into the brain, is what I think is happening with those aluminum-based vaccines. The immune cells actually escort the aluminum into the brain and deliver it to the brain. And I don't know if you're aware of let's see, I've lost his name now. I don't do well with names sometimes. Exley. Exley is his last name,
Okay.
Exley.
Don't worry about it.
And I'll get his first name later. But anyway, Exley. He's been studying aluminum all his life, and he's an expert, PhD, all that kind of thing, written lots of papers. And he looked at autistic brains post-mortem, and he was shocked at how much aluminum he found in the autistic brains. You find aluminum in Alzheimer's brains, by the way, and people believe that aluminum plays a role in Alzheimer's. So it's kind of interesting that the autism and the Alzheimer's both have high aluminum in the brain, which I think is probably connected to both the symptoms of both of those conditions. That's when he became convinced that the vaccines played a role. Before that, he didn't think so. But once he saw that aluminum in the brain, he became very outspoken, and of course, he got in trouble and all of that professionally, because that's what happens to you when you reveal these things.
Mm-hmm. So didn't you say there was some sort of study done with, I guess, people on dialysis?
Yes,
Ended up with
very good.
aluminum in the
You've got a
brain.
good memory. Yes, definitely. That was interesting because they were just doing dialysis and they weren't paying attention to the aluminum in the water. I mean, they didn't know they needed to, but then they discovered these people on dialysis were getting dementia, and they finally were able to really trace it to the aluminum almost indisputably. And then they became good at taking the aluminum out of the water to make sure when they made the dialysis treatment, they made sure there was no aluminum in the water, and then the problem went away. So that was very, very conclusive that the aluminum was associated with the Alzheimer's, the dementia in those patients.
Yo, so with all of this stuff being done, right? So I mean, we're talking about a lot of this is medical mainstream stuff that they're doing, that they're supposed to be kind of studying and doing tests um uh and kind of looking at what you got, the control group versus the test group and all of that stuff. Um, they're not finding any of this stuff when they do their studies.
What do you mean? I mean, why are they? How do they keep their narrative alive? I guess is what you're asking.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that is a very good question, and I am actually mystified as to how they are able to fool the public to the degree that they are. I mean, the number of people who are taking statin drugs because their doctor told them to. People trust their doctor, and they shouldn't. I think they shouldn't, because the doctor is
So
being fed by the pharmaceutical industry.
So I think one of the trials that I think you mentioned is the Gardasil trial,
Yes, right.
right? And
That's
so
another one. Gosh, that is a really dangerous vaccine, in my opinion. And I think it's going to, first of all, it's not doing what it's supposed to do, which is to protect you from cervical cancer. I don't think that's going to happen. And in fact, the evidence is growing that, in fact, even cervical cancer was coming out higher among young people after the vaccine. In the UK, there were studies that were showing that the rates were going up. And the problem is that the vaccine has this virus in it, that's that HPV, that's associated with cervical, even not proven that it causes it, but it's associated with cervical cancer. And the idea was to immunize you so you would have antibodies against HPV, and then that would protect you. That was the concept. But they're giving it to these kids who are like 14 years old, and you don't get cervical cancer until you're 60, so they're sort of making a huge assumption that that's going to actually be beneficial when they're 60 years old, to keep that away all those years. They have no proof that it's doing anything useful. And it has an extremely toxic form of aluminum in it. It's an aluminum phosphate sulfate, if I remember correctly. Very, very sophisticated choice of a particular form of aluminum that's extremely toxic in order to induce this immune response, And so it's a very, and of course it's caused a lot of nasty side effects. And one of those side effects, I suspect, is going to be infertility. So I think it's going to affect the fertility of these kids. And I don't think it's going to protect them from cervical cancer.
And so, didn't you say part of the trial was they had two groups? They gave one of them the whole vaccine,
yes.
and then the other one they took out the active ingredient, but they
Yes.
gave them everything else that was in the
including
vaccine.
that aluminum, that toxic aluminum, was in the control group. And both groups had bad outcomes, but they said, well, there wasn't that much difference, because what was in the control group was the same toxic element that was causing problems in the treatment group.
Right. And so
It's amazing they were allowed to do that. That seems so criminal to me. It's completely nuts that you would think that was a valid test.
But I mean, the thing is, that's the narrative, right? So with that, they can sell, well, look, there's no difference between, the control group and the people who got the vaccine.
And
right?
Therefore it's safe.
Now,
therefore it's safe.
And therefore it's safe, right? Exactly.
I know. It's kind of twisted logic, isn't it?
Exactly. But you know what? That's the kind of logic you use when you're trying to sell some poison, right?
The
fact of the matter
absolutely.
is you injected everybody with poison and everybody was messed up the same way. So it's like, there's no difference. Vaccine's safe. They were going to get sick anyway. It had nothing to do with us. Right.
And there are studies coming out now. There's been several now where people have looked at vaccinated versus unvaccinated groups, and they're finding enormous differences in the health. Like there's Thomas. Let's see. Again, I'm going to do names. His last name is Thomas, I think.
Uh-huh.
A pediatrician who in Oregon, I believe, who had a huge clinic and had treated many kids over many years, and he was always kind of in favor of low vaccination. Spread them out, don't necessarily do all of them, sort of minimize your vaccination. And so people who didn't want to vaccinate their kids were attracted to his clinic. So he had a lot of patients who had their kids completely unvaccinated. And then he had other patients who had the full program. So he had a very nice, group of kids that had all kinds of different degrees of vaccination. And he looked at the number of visits they had to the doctor's office that involved something other than just what you'd call sort of a maintenance visit, when you would go to get your vaccines. So any visit because you have an ear infection or you've got a tummy ache, some kind of problem, you go to the doctor. And he just tallied up the number of of these visits among the different kids, and then looked at the unvaccinated, completely unvaccinated against the completely vaccinated, to find a huge difference, that the vaccinated kids were showing up much more often for issues, and these issues were related to autoimmune disease, things like eczema and asthma and runny nose, this kind of thing. There were all
So it's
kinds of
Dr.
different.
Paul Thomas.
Paul Thomas, thank you. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you know what? And I think you were talking about a website where I guess someone looked at the ingredients in the different vaccines and then found that there were correlating allergies
Yes,
to
yes.
each one.
I remember well when I came across that, because this was actually early days for me when I was just starting to look into autism and thinking about the vaccines as a possible factor. And I can remember very clearly. I was in my office at MIT, and I was discovering peanut allergy was going up, and people were allergic to all kinds of different things. So there were just all kinds of allergies that were going up. Peanut allergy is something like 2% of the population now. It's scary. Kids are afraid to take a peanut butter sandwich to school, and so all these different allergies that were showing up to different things, and I was just searching, and then I came across this webpage, which was written by a woman who had gotten obsessed with this idea, and she had gone and looked at all the vaccines to see the ingredients, and she knew about all the different allergies to the foods, and she was able to match up every single food for which there was an allergy with at least one vaccine that contained that food in it. And so, and I remember there's one last one that she was able to find a vaccine in Japan that actually had that ingredient. So it's just, I remember just pacing the halls after I looked at that article. I was like, wow, this is so scary. Just to be aware of the degree to which food allergies are probably being greatly increased as a consequence of vaccination. And it kind of makes sense, because foods don't get injected into your body in any natural way.
Mm-hmm.
When it gets injected, there it is. It's unprocessed food sitting there in your blood, and your immune cells don't like that. Foreign proteins pass the gut barrier. That's trouble,
100%. And so, yeah, like when you start putting all of the data together, like you said, you were pacing up and down the hallways because you were disturbed as to how it happened.
Yeah,
Like,
I just was so restless. I had to take a walk. It was just, I was really becoming awakened at that time. I hadn't really wanted to believe that the vaccines had no benefit, that they were all harm. But I'm really
yeah.
kind of reaching that point of view at this point. I think it's just a
Wait. Did you say you're kind of reaching it at this point?
Well, I started saying, well, maybe smallpox and polio, because those are the ones I had.
Right.
Maybe they're okay. And then eventually you think, well, maybe not. And maybe nothing's okay, because you kind of finally reach a point where you realize the entire concept of vaccination is problematic at its core.
You know
It's just not
what?
something you should be doing.
Liddell, can I ask her a question real
Oh,
quick about
go
that?
ahead, Chuck.
Doctor, are you familiar with the studies that have shown that frequencies, that man-made frequencies, that once they're introduced into nature, for instance, radio waves, X-ray, and the like, as each new level of technology has been introduced over time, there has been a global reaction to that of flu-like symptoms to which a vaccine has been introduced, and then usually after that said vaccine is introduced, that's when you actually see most of the deaths occur. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of some writings along those lines, and I'm aware that there's a lot of questions about EMFs and 5G, and all this stuff that's rolling out with rapidly rolling out right now, and we're doing a giant experiment without enough evidence of harm, so we don't know, and people are sounding the alarm, and other people are saying, oh, that's ridiculous. So it's one of those same situations, like glyphosate, really, and like the COVID vaccines, of conflicting viewpoints that are hard to pull together. People get polarized into different positions on it, and
Sure.
And you don't know for sure what the right answer is. But yeah, I think that could very well be problematic, all these man-made frequencies that are increasing in prevalence over time.
Okay, great. Just wanted to see if you had been that had come across you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple other things before I know you got to get up out of here. So I don't think we talked about sulfur at all. Can you just run us
We talked
down?
about sulfate, which
So yeah, we
has
talked about
sulfur in it.
sulfate.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Can you go ahead?
Go ahead.
No. What I was going to say was because I know there's the way that you talk about sulfur and its role in the body. You correlated to like diabetes. I
Right.
know the lack of sulfur contributing to heart disease.
Yes.
So I think sulfur, like glyphosate, both are. We don't know a lot about them,
Yes.
right? All we
Yes.
know is that one, the government for some reason is removing it from the water, removing it from the air, trying to get it out the soil, trying to get it out your food, which to me is a giant red flag. If they don't want me to have it, then I probably need it, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting point of view, but I can see why you would think that way.
Yo, I
Yeah,
swear to God,
that's
anytime they
it.
say, hey, we don't want you to have it, I probably desperately need that joint. But it was something that I think is interesting. You know how people talk about diets, right? So I know you
Uh-huh.
talked about the Mediterranean diet, right?
Yes.
And how people will latch on to crazes. They'll say, okay, well, there's a study that the people in in this area live the longest and are the healthiest, and so I'll just eat what they eat,
Right.
right? And so you get all these different crazes, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I know one of the things you were specific about is the Mediterranean diet. Can
Yes.
you talk about why that doesn't work for
Well,
everyone?
yes, I think what I probably said, I'm guessing, I remember talking about this. In the Mediterranean diet works well, but if you take it out of the Mediterranean, it might not because it depends upon the sulfur that's naturally there. And the Mediterranean volcanic rock. In fact, there's the island of Crete, which was an interesting study that I saw concerning Crete, which is a Greek island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, versus another island that was up north on the limestone plateau. Two different islands off the coast of Greece where they had similar diets, but the people in Crete had very low heart disease risk, whereas the ones in the other island had much, much higher risk of heart disease. And so what's the difference? And the difference is that Crete is a basalt volcanic island on the ridge crest where there's all this basalt rock, and basalt rock has lots of sulfur, whereas the northern island was limestone, and that doesn't have a lot of sulfur. So just the lack of sulfur in the water alone could be a major factor. And then, of course, the sulfur in the soil, the food, everything cascades up. So when you live in a place where there's a lot of sulfur in the rock, you have huge benefit, I think. And that shows up around the world. And actually, there's again, this is going to be a name problem here, but there was a book written by a woman doctor whose first name was Daphne, I remember, and it was something or other. I can't remember the last name, Daphne. She wrote a book looking at different places in the world where people were healthy. And one of the places she looked at was Iceland, and was quite interesting. She had a chapter on each place, and she had a chapter on Iceland. Iceland has lots of volcanic rock. It's got all those eruptions. And the volcanic rock has lots of sulfur. And the people in Iceland are really healthy. They live a long time. And but when they had an eruption that actually kind of caused trouble because of all the rocks, you couldn't grow crops right after the eruption because there was a lot of rock and stuff. So people left the island. And this was in the late 1800s. They left the island and they moved to northern Canada, and they assumed the same diet basically, but they didn't keep the health once they had moved away from Iceland. And she remarked on that, but she didn't have an explanation for why. But I think it's the sulfur. I think it's the supply of sulfur in the soil, in the food, in the air that's keeping them healthy.
So pretty much, so a food isn't a food no matter where it is, right?
Right,
The
it matters. Yes,
soil matters, right?
yes,
The soil is what dictates what's in the food,
yes.
right? Um, does somebody have a question? Who is it?
Yeah, I want to add on, but you can finish. I'm sorry about that.
All right, yeah. So, food isn't food, and so just looking at foods around the world, when people say, "Yo, these people are living to 173 years old, we're going to eat what they eat," and so
Right.
your
Not that
rice isn't
simple.
their rice. It's not
And
that
also, of
simple.
course, what's in the food as far as glyphosate is concerned, because I think a lot of the studies on the fats have been misguided because they're looking at two different fats. one of which contains a lot more glyphosate than the other one does. And they might be comparing, polyunsaturated versus saturated, but they're actually, glyphosate's the big elephant in the room that they're not noticing. That's making a huge difference in the response to these fats. So I think the studies on food are flawed because they're not considering things like the toxic chemicals that are in those foods. I really, really emphasize eating a certified organic diet. That would really be my closing message, because we found when we converted to certified organic, we felt much healthier, my husband and I. We've been eating certified organic. We won't buy it at the grocery store unless it has a certified organic label. And it's caused some trouble sometimes when you have a recipe we'd like to do and we can't find it. But that we're very strict about it, and I think it's really important to eat certified organic. And I realize it's not available everywhere. We just recently traveled to parts of the country that were more remote, and it's very difficult, in fact, impossible to maintain a certified organic diet in some of these more remote places. You just don't have enough choices of organic food in the grocery stores. So that's problematic. We need to get it more widely available.
So one of the places I know you talk about, the best place to get sulfur is from meats, right?
Yes. Meats, eggs, yeah, cheese, yeah, they're all good.
Yeah. So if you're a vegan, then what do? You just look at it real hard?
Right, that's right. There are good sources of sulfur that are vegetarian, though. So for all the cruciferous vegetables, onions and garlic, those are all really good sources of sulfur. But there's taurine. Taurine is a very important sulfur-containing amino acid, and it's only present in animal-based foods. There's none in the vegetarian diet. So I think that's probably an important consideration. But all of the sulfur-containing amino acids are much more common in animal-based foods than in plant-based foods.
So you're saying they screwed? Got you. Appreciate that.
Sorry, you vegans.
We call them fakins around here. No problem.
Fakins.
Oh yeah, call them
okay,
fakins.
They have to speak up. Well, we're coming along to the end of the line here, aren't we?
Yeah, I know, right? So yeah, I think I got in all my questions.
I had a great time talking with you. It was lovely. Thank you so much. You really well informed.
I appreciate you coming on.
That.
I'm informed because I watch a lot of you guys' videos, man. You guys put a lot of information out, man. I consume it.
You were great. You really remembered things too. You've got a steel trap brain.
Yo, when you tell these people, Dr. Seneff, will you tell them? So first of all, I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, I've seen a lot of your information, and one of the things I like to do is bring it back to the fam, because I think that's the kind of stuff that needs to get out, right? So you're shadow banned, Carrie shadow banned, Dr. Callan shadow banned, like all these people are shadow banned, and so it's real tough to get the information out. So this is the kind of stuff that people need to know. They need to know sulfur is important. They need to know cholesterol is important, right? And they need to know that glyphosate is everywhere, and you gotta avoid it.
That's right. Those are really important takeaway messages. So
want to appreciate you coming through. I ain't gonna hold you. I'm gonna let you get out and go in Siberia and get some of that Siberian sun.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Thanks so much.
If I have any questions, I will be reaching out and begging you to come back on. Just know that.
I would be delighted to return. This was fun. So thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. You know how to get out, right?
Thank you.
I think so. Yes.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Take it easy, Dr. Seneff.
Bye-bye.
Good. All right, guys. Real quick. So did anybody have anything they wanted to add on? I know she couldn't stay. She was on a real tight time crunch, and I had a bunch of stuff I wanted to get through. So maybe I'll have her back on, and we'll have her kind of engage a little bit. Did anybody have anything they wanted to add on or questions about anything she said?
Oh, initially, Bo had a lot to say, but I guess they're gone.
Nah, he just wanted to troll. For real.
Now, I just wanted to add, I know, just like you had pointed out when she said she might be pretty, like now she might be accepting this after all this. And there were things that she said where, she said they're not considering or they're not taking it into account or whatever, but it's like, it's intentional, And I think she was really having a hard time with that. I think, you know what I'm saying?
Hey man, it's a tough pill to swallow, right? To recognize that all the fuck shit that you running into is deliberate and intentional. So, hey
Well,
man,
even to that point, even like, so like my thing is going to get water from fresh springs and all of that, right? At home in upstate New York, in Saratoga, New York, they have a park because it's called Saratoga Springs. They have all these different springs, right? They had a sulfur one, right? And I was asking around at the park. I was like, "Oh, what is that?" They were like, "Well, that's a sulfur spring, but people really don't drink that because it's like it really stinks really bad and it's hard to like take in." But now that I know what I know, that water is actually really good for you. It's like
hey, you
it's
know what?
what?
Hey,
So,
Joseph, those.
go ahead,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead, Chuck. No, no,
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say, definitely go to your Sulphur Springs. After everything you've heard here, and like I've mentioned to you guys, there's Sulphur Springs like down here in Georgia that I go to. So when you go to a sulfur spring, if it does have a high content, it will smell like rotten eggs. What you want to
Yes.
do is collect the water, bring it home, leave it uncapped for days, sometimes 2 or 3 days. Let it off gas, and most of the deep harsh smell will off gas. The mineralization will still be in the water that you're looking for, but you won't have that heavy gassy smell to it. And it may still be there, but for the most part, you're going to get rid of a large percentage of that. So just try that.
Well, I'm definitely going to do it. Now that you mentioned that, but my other question was, um, what in correlation to, because like some of you all know I'm on DMSO, because DMSO is sulfur too,
Yeah,
right?
and MSM.
Is it is there too much? Is there what happens if there's an overload of sulfur in the body? That's
You know
okay.
what, bro? I would like,
That's
because I think I've heard a few people talk about bathing in it. You might want to try bathing in it, bro.
Yeah, your skin is the biggest organ
Interesting.
Well,
on your
I just
body.
want to warn people that when you do, or if you do visit a spring, my PTR is about the the trickle that you're going to probably run
Girl,
into.
you anyway.
So don't
Child,
be discouraged. I'm just I'm just
no,
telling
I know.
people
There's
not to
different
be discouraged.
there's different springs with different water pressures and
Right,
different
but
water
I'm just
flows. Like
telling people if they do run into a spring, like, it could be, a small trickle of water. So don't be discouraged. That's all I'm
Hmm.
saying.
but you said
All
bathe
part of
in
the
it.
experience.
You said bathe in it because it'll what? Because I'm interested. Because like now I want to
It
like.
absorbs through your skin. You can get the sulfur in through your skin, bro.
And you can order food grade sulfur online, and you can order it in 20-pound bags, and you can actually take that, and I mean you're gonna stink, but you could put it into a bath and soak in it for sure.
I mean, I don't mind because like there's a specific thing that I'm trying to eradicate out of my body, which is why I'm taking the DMSO in the first place, and I'm noticing the changes from the DSMO, from the not only from the solution that's ingestible, but also from the solution that's topical. Like I'm noticing a
Hmm.
stark difference from my usage of it, which is why even though like the gel that I put on my leg, it has a tingling feeling, kind of like like a Bengay-ish, but a little bit stronger. Um, Even though I don't be wanting to use it all the time, I use it like right now. I'm using it when I first wake up in the morning and when I get out of the shower, and then right before I go to bed. And so it's like I'm trying to get more usage of it because I'm seeing benefits from it, but it is a little bit annoying at times. But I was just wondering, like, if it absorbs in your skin, will it have like faster effects to where like you might not need it, or and there aren't any really real side effects from using it too much?
I mean, over mineralization. I mean, I can't speak to that, to be honest, but like, I mean, I would rather. I mean, your body processes out minerals so quick it uses them up because so many people are mineral deficient. and then what the body can't use, it will process out. But I mean, I'm I don't think you're going to OD on sulfur, if that's the question.
Thank you. Okay, no doubt, no doubt, no doubt.
I will still use it carefully though. With
Yeah, I
anything.
mean, it's more so on the ingestible side. You know, on the ingestible side is where I would go for it. Topically, I mean, you're gonna have to like just sit in a whole bath of sulfur for, you know, all week long. But yeah, but just going and collecting like sulfur spring water and things like that, you can drink as much of that stuff as you want. I'm drinking gallons of that stuff.
Yeah, like I'm telling you, like this park literally has like 10 or 15 different springs. You can go get different types of water. They got a sulfur spring. They got spring water, like mineral water, like all these different springs. And I normally just go for what I know is the spring water, and I would get that because like down here down south, I also go to a well, an artesian well, and get my water as well. Like that's the water I drink. That's the water I cook with, et cetera, et cetera. But I was thinking, you know, like while I'm home. Because that's the place I go to when I'm home. Now I know what the benefits are. So now it's like, okay, now I can actually use it and not have fear behind using it. Because it does stink. It stinks like fucking pure hell. So that was my only thing.
All right. Anybody else with any other questions, stuff they wanted to comment on? This is she came through and killed it. Let's see.
Yo, what's going on,
What
brother?
up? What's going on, Mike?
How you doing? Seems like I missed a really dope conversation with this doctor that was here. No worries, I'll catch the replays.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, catch the replay, bro.
Thank God for replays. Shit.
I know, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. It was a question just on sulfur or whatever. So, mine understand whether that sulfur literally is one of those things that we just regularly need in our body, especially for detoxification purposes.
Hey, bro. When you listen to her talk about it, it's not just about detoxification. It literally helps the entire body function, right? They minimize, and I think this is one of the things that we were kind of getting to, that they minimize the importance of it, right? And so it gives them an excuse to take it out of the water, right? Because the difference between hard water and soft water, right, is the sulfur content, right? So they take the sulfur out of hard water so that to turn into soft water, so now it's safe for you to drink, right? To take it out of the air, to take it out of the water, they take it out of the soil, they take it out of everything. You get what I'm saying? There's whether the Clean Air Act removes sulfur from the air. You get what I'm saying? So they're literally trying to prevent you from fucking taking it in because it's so fucking vital, right? Everything they do is to promote unhealthiness in your fucking body, right? All their fucking laws, all their acts, all the food that they pass. All the laws that they pass, all the food that they approve, right? All of that shit is about making us sick, right?
It's crazy, bro, because, the more time that passes, the more things that are unearthed, and I realize it's just, damn, man, it's high over deception. And, and then, even for somebody like me and then other people on stage, I'm assuming they're trying to eat healthy and do the best that they can. And we get, really informative doctors like her come on stage and she adds more context to certain things that we knew, but we didn't necessarily know. Damn, man, like these guys are really stopping at nothing to make sure that we are not the healthiest we can be. And unless you're somebody that's constantly seeking the truth and knowledge, you think you're doing the right thing. In reality, like you're not. You're being deceived on. And so I appreciate even just catching the tail end of that. I was just like, oh wow, I missed a dope room, man. And it's funny, I don't know if you guys had touched on this or whatever, because talking about the whole shot stuff or whatever. I work at a hospital, and unfortunately, because of my financial circumstances, I wasn't really able to leave my job, so I was forced to take the shot. So I immediately was looking for things that I could do to try to detox. I don't know if it's 100%, whatever, but I was just immediately looking for stuff. So I was looking for things, and I know, I think, what is it? something that was mentioned, I forgot, I don't know if it was Judy Mikovits or somebody would have mentioned about dimethylglycine or whatever and how it's able to do certain things. So it's like it was also sulfur based, or it was methylated. So I was just like, man, it's crazy that in order to find out these things, you have to talk to people that are so-called not popular, that will look into these alternative medicines. But if you listen to the general public, oh, this person's a quack, oh, this person's in it for money, and it's so. And when you
Hey,
say that,
yo,
it's like, okay, yeah,
you ever heard of chlorine dioxide?
yeah, I have heard about that. You've heard of what is it? You heard of what is it, ASEA or some shit? So
Who?
I've heard of chlorine. It's what do you call it? It's a certain type of water, whatever that this company. What is it? I think it's called ASEA. It's SASEA or whatever. But it's supposed to do what chlorine dioxide does, but on a better level, whatever. But yeah, continue. I don't want to cut
What
you off.
the fuck? Yo, if you really trying to detox from the jab, bro, I would look at chlorine dioxide. I don't know no water. Like I would be interested to know the science behind a water that could
Oh
get
yeah, not
metals out
regular
your
water,
body.
bro. You know what I'm saying? I wish I knew the basic science on that shit too, but I know yeah, I know you were mentioning the doctor that was here, and I'm assuming Dr. Carrie Madej. And do you know of an herbalist called, I think, what's her name, Dr. Ariana Love?
Ariana Love? No, I never heard the name, bro.
Yeah, definitely look her up, bro, because she's also a well-informed herbalist as well. You know what I'm saying? That was looking into different things. So she was one of the ones that mentioned that. She also mentions chlorine dioxide and a few other different things or whatever. But the fact that you even know that, bro, it's good. That means you've been doing your research too, or at least just been looking just for alternatives, so people have something. You know what I'm saying? It's nothing's happened with me. I'm somebody that's regularly healthy, and I always supplement all the time. So I'm just more concerned about the long term shit. I don't know. So whatever I can do to get my health better than what it is, I want to do. But glyphosate just such a rough deal, bro, because it's in everything. And because it's such a neurotoxin, it can, even if you're taking something that you're supposed to, because of the messed up effects from it, you don't even know how your body's even interacting with the food. So it's a frustrating thing, man. You know what I'm saying?
So one of the things that we one of the things that so we talked about with when Carrie Rivera was here, and I've seen Dr. Seneff have a conversation with Carrie. One of the things that they talk about is how chlorine dioxide breaks down glyphosate. Not only does it break it down, but it actually breaks it down into proteins that can be used by the body. So that's one of the things that I think is important as we kind of go along and we talk about kind of health and ways to combat the amount of glyphosate that we encounter on the daily, right? Is understanding that there are things that you can do to break down the glyphosate that's in your body. You get what I'm saying? And so it just takes some education. That's all, right?
Oh no, definitely, bro. Appreciate you.
Yeah. What's up, Ezra?
Linnell, a friend of mine in Melbourne, she's takes ASEA. Swears by it. I've not tried it, but it's on my radar. I've just posted a link to what it is. ASEA Global in the chat.
I see it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
ASEA. All right.
Oh, cool. You know about it too.
Do they say? Hold on. Do they say what it is on here at all? Like, do they give a scientific breakdown of how it operates? Is it it's not something natural. Is it natural? What is it? No, I can't do it on here. Don't worry about it. I'll look into it. We'll talk about it on Wednesday. All right. Anything else before we get up out of here, guys? I don't want to hold y'all came to hear Dr. Seneff. It was a great talk. So look, we're back Wednesday for the Conspiracy Cookout with 10-4 family. And then we're back Friday for 10-4 halftime. So Wednesday we'll be here 8 o'clock Eastern. No, 9 o'clock Eastern. I'm sorry. Excuse me. 9 o'clock Eastern on Wednesday, 10 o'clock Eastern on Friday. We're doing Conspiracy News Network, so we're going to do the real CNN. So we're going to do news on Wednesday. Conspiracy News Network come through to learn about what's been going on. We were off last week, so it's going to be loaded. So make sure y'all come through Wednesday, and then Friday we're gonna redo the top 20 most important conspiracies. So that's what we're doing this week. Want to thank everybody for coming, hanging out, man. This was cool. Dr. Seneff came through and killed it. Like I said, I'm gonna try to have her back, and we'll talk about some other stuff. And then I got a couple other guests I'm working on. So this was dope. I'm gonna see you guys in a minute. Appreciate everybody for coming out. See y'all Wednesday, 9 o'clock Eastern. We out.